Whenever you take a pill, you're placing an incredible amount of trust in it. You trust it's going to make you better, but have you ever stopped to think about the system behind that trust? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden story of how our medicine's quality is supposed to be guaranteed, and what happens when that guarantee is broken. Our source material puts it perfectly with this quote: "A pill isn't just some chemical formula in a bottle. The moment it's in your hand, it becomes a promise. A promise from the manufacturer to you that it's pure, safe, and that it's gonna work." Everything we're about to get into really revolves around this one fundamental idea of trust. So that's the big question, isn't it? Who is guaranteeing that promise is actually kept? It's so easy to just assume there's this perfect, foolproof system in place, but, well, the reality is a whole lot more complicated. Let's find out what's really going on. All right, so the very first line of defense, the main document that's supposed to make this whole promise official, is something that acts like a drug's character certificate. It's officially called a Certificate of Analysis, or a CofA for short. The easiest way to think about it is like a super detailed report card for one specific batch of medicine. When a country wants to import a drug, this is the very first document their regulators look at to check its quality. And we're not talking about a simple pass-fail grade here. No, this thing is incredibly detailed. It lists the exact purity level, it profiles every single impurity, it even measures stuff like moisture content and leftover solvents from the manufacturing process. It's essentially a complete scientific fingerprint of that specific drug batch. And this, right here, brings us to a really uncomfortable question. If this document, this all-important report card, is created by the very same company that's making the drug, can they lie? Is it possible for this certificate to be faked? The answer, and this is pretty shocking, is a resounding yes. A huge scandal involving a pharmaceutical giant called Ranbaxy exposed just how badly this system of trust can be manipulated. Now, to really get this story, you have to understand Ranbaxy's business. They were kings of the generic drug world. So you have a company like GSK that spends billions developing a new drug and sells it under a brand name like Augmentin. Well, generic makers like Ranbaxy wait for that patent to expire, then they swoop in and produce much cheaper copies. And Ranbaxy got enormous doing this. But behind all that success was a really dark secret, and it all came out thanks to a whistleblower. The accusation was just staggering: widespread, systematic data fraud. They weren't just, cutting a few corners, they were actively and intentionally faking the data on their drugs' character certificates. So how on earth did they do it? Well, here's how. Imagine a quality test failed over and over, maybe 10 times. But on the 11th try, it passed. They would just hide the 10 failures and only report the one successful result. They'd claim a drug was 98% pure when in reality it was as low as 80%. They would even go back and change the testing rules after the fact just to make the results look good. It was a massive, deliberate deception. The consequences, when they finally got caught, were absolutely severe. In 2013, Ranbaxy had to plead guilty to felony charges in the United States. And the price tag? A jaw-dropping $500 million fine for their crimes. The promise was broken, and the price was incredibly steep. Okay, so if a company's own certificate can be faked, what stops this from happening all the time? Well, there is a stronger system. There's a guardian that's supposed to be watching over that promise. And that guardian is called Good Manufacturing Practices, or GMP. Now, this isn't just another document. It's a whole system of ethics and rules and procedures that's considered the absolute gold standard in drug manufacturing. In countries like the US, it's simple. If you don't follow GMP, your drug doesn't get approved, period. Let me give you an example of just how ridiculously strict GMP is. Say a scientist mixes two chemicals, a pretty basic step, but they get distracted and forget to write it down in the logbook right away. Under GMP, it doesn't matter if they remember it perfectly the next morning. That work was undocumented. The mixture has to be thrown out, and they have to start all over again. There are absolutely no exceptions. And check this one out. It's a direct shot at the kind of fraud Ranbaxy was committing. Under GMP, if a quality test fails, you can't just run it again and hope for a better result. A failure automatically triggers a formal investigation. A completely separate process kicks off just to find out why it failed. It forces total accountability. So why does a story about an Indian company and American regulations matter to you wherever you happen to be in the world? Well, because the global supply of medicine is all interconnected. It's one big web.
So here's the crucial takeaway. A certificate of analysis, that COA, that's the promise the company makes. But good manufacturing practices, the GMP, that's the strict, tough system that verifies the promise is actually being kept. And without strong GMP enforcement and independent testing, that promise, that COA, it's really just a piece of paper.
And this all leaves us with one final critical question. When your country imports medicine, especially those cheaper generic drugs, are they just taking the company's word for it? Are they relying only on that certificate? Or is there a truly robust system of independent testing and GMP verification in place? Because as we've just seen, trusting the promise without checking the proof can have some pretty serious consequences for all of us.